Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Holly Swenson to the show, and I'm excited to dive into our conversation today. So I'm going to quickly introduce Holly, and then we're going to jump in. So Holly is an award-winning and best-selling author, nurse, wellness advocate, and conscious parenting visionary on a mission to bring more wellness, joy, and intentionality to families and to life beyond parenting. Holly has been featured in USA Today, numerous magazines across news and radio platforms, and has connected with some of the world's top thought leaders. Through her writing, speaking, and connecting, Holly's ultimate aim is to reinvigorate the parenting experience, fostering a generation of more mindful, connected, and emotionally resilient families. Welcome to the show today, Holly. Glad to have you on.
Hi, Johnny. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, Holly, we'd love to know, you're doing all these things, speaking, you're creating, making all this content out there to impact the world. What was your drive behind helping families so much?
Yeah, it's a great question. I truly have been a caregiver since I was a kid. Stepped into this role from a young age, and it's something that I've just carried. It's been kind of woven into the fabric of who I am. And for me, I'm a mother of four. In my previous life, I was a nurse. And so I've always just kind of wanted to give and care for others. And what I found walking the path of becoming a mother and raising four, there's a certain intensity that's involved in learning how to maintain who you are, both as an individual and as a parent. And so I wanted to create a book that would really help other people go from surviving to thriving in their life, because I've had to learn how to activate my thrive while raising my sons. And I still have all four of mine at home, but it's a blend of science and soul is really the work that I like to promote and put out there. And for me, it's been the greatest honor. And I know that this work is my purpose. So I feel very in alignment with what I'm doing, in this day and age. And I love it so much.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I like the blend of science and the soul work as well that you've come across to that. So we'd love to know a little bit about I mentioned about wellness. What is wellness for you?
Wellness is really learning to partner with things in life that are going to help you live at the highest level. And I think that's, for me, I really take a holistic approach. So it's mind, body, spirit, and environment. So it's making time to connect with all of those aspects within you and even around you, like especially when it comes to the environment. So where you're spending your time, what you're watching, what you're ingesting. Wellness is a buzzword in this day and age, but I think that it's really learning to partner with those things in your life that are going to help you truly live, work, operate, parent from the highest level possible.
A blend of all those things. And have you kind of always been into wellness, or is that kind of something that's developed over time?
I'll say I've always been healthy. I've always liked to move. I think in terms of, from a young age, I always played sports. I loved that part. But I think going deeper and partnering with more mindfulness, like I do my meditation. I've been doing that for probably 8 or 9 years now. Actively, like in the morning, I'll wake up. And I think the depth came later. That came after I stepped into becoming a mother. And in my book, I talk about this. I had a particularly challenging year, and it led me to finding a wellness retreat that I think really set me on a path for becoming more intentional with how I live my life, the choices I make, with the practices that I partner with. And so I think I've always been healthy, but I think in terms of really going deeper, that didn't land for me until I became a mother.
I love that. You've got so insight. And you said you lead a wellness retreat. You've created a wellness retreat.
So no, I don't do retreats, but I actually am launching an online course in January. So I wrote my book. I've been guesting on podcasts and news radio, really promoting this because I want to have a voice in the world for helping people to wake up more in their lives. Like for me, that lights me up, and knowing that I can positively impact others is the greatest calling. So I love this. But no, I don't lead retreats, but I actually am building community though come the new year. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, wow, love that. So, yeah, like with families in terms of emotionally resilient, who's those emotionally resilient families. What makes an emotionally resilient family for you?
I think it starts at the top. It's top down, I think, because children are always watching you. They're always paying attention to how you're leading and showing up as the mother or father. And so when it comes to emotional, resilience and intelligence, it's learning to connect before you correct. I think a lot of adults in this day and age were raised with perhaps a level of dysfunction or reaction or more of that authoritarian type upbringing. And so this is a hard pattern to interrupt, but I think it really comes down to start noticing who you are, how you're showing up, and how your energy is impacting your children. And so if you're having a lot of pushback, if you're having a lot of issues, that might be an invitation to start making some subtle shifts in your life, and it can be becoming more self-aware, really leaning on, I think just your children are some of your biggest teachers. So if you see things that are starting to kind of bubble up in your children, I think also paying attention to that as well. Like one of the things that I've often said is that children are some of the biggest, like for me, they're some of the biggest gurus that I've ever had in my life. Taught me more about myself, my strengths, my weaknesses, and than anyone else to date, truly. And so I think paying attention to how your children are doing, that can also be a really helpful thing to partner with.
I love the phrase you said a moment ago, connect before you correct as well. And I guess that starts with yourself first.
It sure does. Yes. And I think that's where I think there's a lot of parenting information out there, but I think if you really want to start having big impacts in your life, it has to start with you first. You can't just be looking at your children and what they're doing wrong or what's going wrong with your children. You also have to invite a certain level of curiosity into your own life of how you're showing up. And if you have parts of you that aren't feeling good, or you're not tending to yourself, you're not taking care of yourself, starting to notice how that's showing up in your parenting as well, because it's all interconnected. I mean, it's not separate.
Is there anything you found beneficial in your journey for connecting yourself? I know there's a lot of tools out there, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective.
Well, one of the biggest practices that has helped me is meditation and prayer. Doing that every morning, like when I wake up, I have my own little ritual, and I like to make. I'm a tea drinker, so I make my tea. I have an infrared heater that I love to sit under. I light a candle. I have my moment of really getting grounded in my life so that when my children come down to greet me, when they wake up, I'm ready to hit the day from a more conscious space. I feel like I've taken care of myself. So that has been one of the most impactful practices that I have invited in to my life. But I'm also, the other pieces here, like I'm a big yogi. I love to do hot yoga. I love nature, so I try to get outside every day, either walk, run, go do it, spend time on the trail, that sort of thing. So I would say those are two of the biggest things, the movement and taking care of my mind and my body. And also, actually, I will add a couple other things because these are really important. I'm really mindful of the food I eat. So I think the fuel you're putting in your body does translate into how you show up, how you feel. So I really try to eat clean. That helps me a lot. And then sleep, making sure I'm getting 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep a night. That helps me to function at the highest level. Those are I will say four things that are incredibly important to me, and also really help me learn to help me glow from the inside out, without a doubt.
Yeah, I can relate to the sleep thing as well with the impact on mood. And I know it's probably like I'm not a parent, so I know it's probably challenging. I know it probably is challenging for some, especially with a new baby and those kind of situations as well. But yeah, sounds like sort of that taking care of yourself, giving yourself that space has been foundational for connecting with you and therefore the impact on your relationship with your children as well.
100%. Yes.
So you mentioned about I mentioned earlier, and you mentioned about being a registered nurse as well. Were there any like lessons from that you were able to take and has helped you in your ability or in being a parent?
Well, I think yes, absolutely, because you're always learning, you're always growing from anything that you have in your tool belt. I think for me, one of the things that I actually wrote about in my book is something called the 5 rights of parenting. Now, this stemmed from my time in the hospital. So there's something called the 5 rights of medication administration. And that's, you're looking at things like when you go to administer medication, you're looking to make sure you have the right patient, the right route, the right dose, the right time, those sorts of things. I wanted to apply this to the parenting realm because that was the world that I found myself in. So I always like to build on my knowledge. And so the 5 rights are really designed to be a quick way to touch base with yourself on how you're presenting as a parent. And they really work to help ensure that you're doing the right thing and not causing unnecessary harm to yourself or your children in the process of parenting. So you want to think of these as a supportive parenting protocol. And I'm happy to unpack those if you want me to, but
Oh,
it
I'd
does
love
take.
to. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to hear about the 5 rights of parenting.
Yes, yes, yes. So the first one is right now. And this one is really learning to be in the moment with your child and being present. So, not texting, not working on 3 different things, which most of us are. We're all very distracted and overstimulated in this day and age. But it's really about when you show up that you are fully in. And if you cannot put aside what you're doing, which that is reality, that you make time to connect with your child and say, I can't stop what I'm doing right now, but in 20 minutes or in an hour, you will get my full and undivided attention because time is ever fleeting as a parent. And I think even 20 minutes of intentional time will make incredible positive impacts on your relationship and your connection with your child. I mean, I think so many of us are living on our own devices and we're disconnected even in the same house. You see it at the dinner table, you see it, kids are going to their bedroom and they're holing up in their bedroom. And so I think really making time to be intentional and being present in the now is magic and it's necessary. The second right is right intent. And this is about being intentional with the choices you make, the guidelines you set, and how you're treating your child. So if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, it might be an invitation to reevaluate your parenting strategy. And what I mean by this is if you are perpetuating something with your children that you didn't love as a child, there's a lot of unconsciousness that goes on in parenting because you only know what you know. But if it's feeling like it's damaging or if you're not showing up the way you're proud of, it could just be an invitation to go a little bit deeper and unpack why it is you're doing what you're doing. So that's the second one. The third one is the right use of speech. And I believe that your voice is a tool of creation, so you have that power to uplift or tear down. And I will say, I think this can be one of the toughest rights to implement, like across the board, because there's so many moments. You've got moments of joy, you have moments of all of these different things, but you also have a lot of triggering moments as a parent. And so the invitation is to speak with mindfulness, but when you forget and, you want to apologize because the reality is we're only human. And so I think that role modeling really should start in childhood. You're going to misstep, you're going to misspeak, but making it right is going to help them learn how to have healthier connections in their life as they grow. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about the next right.
All right. So the fourth right, the fourth right is the right use of power. Yes. So you want to wield your power with care, right? You have been bestowed with this power of raising another human, which to me is as big as it gets. So you're the one responsible for setting boundaries, the discipline, and you have that final say in whatever issue might arise along the teen years plus that you might be blessed to have your child under your roof. So you want to be mindful that you're not abusing this power. And again, you want to be intentional in the framework you set for your child. So this is just an invitation to check in with yourself on how you're showing up, how you're presenting, any boundaries that you're setting, any discipline, just cultivating more internal awareness and more intentionality into the process is what's asked for. And then the last right is the right use of love. Now, this is my favorite. I believe that love is the cure for all that ails us, parenting and beyond. And I think that this right should be used as many times a day as you can aspire to, because letting your child know how much you love them and are there for them, it's going to plant their spirit in deep, rich soil as they grow. So you want to give that love freely without expectation. And truly, your child will likely mirror the love you give them. But even if they don't, especially as they get older, the teenage years, even if they're not reciprocating it, it is being received, it is being felt, and it does make a difference.
And how does, I want to, touch on the right of love a little bit. Like maybe for that parent out there, again, not being a parent, but just from what I hear in like events and communities, from like parents, when they feel like they're giving to their like kid and their kid's maybe not receptive, maybe their child, maybe they're a teenager, maybe they're older. Like, does the book dive a little bit more into how you can hold that kind of like high level of love when it's hard?
I don't necessarily dive deep into that aspect. But I think it's learning to, I mean, because there is so much sacrifice that comes on with being a parent. And some days it does feel thankless, your job, and so that can kind of grind on you. But what I speak to more is really learning to find the calm in the storm. So even so, for example, for the love, if you feel like you're giving it all away and you're not getting any back, learning how to fill your own vessel so that when your children are egocentric or they're, which children are egocentric, that's the current state of life that they're in, that you can essentially fill your own cup. So what I lean more into is really learning how to have a strong base so that you can be the base of the scales as you're kind of getting bounced around from, this to that and whatever might show up on your journey, that you have a solid foundation. So that's more of where I go with my work.
And I like that of like filling up the cup, then you're not kind of like chasing something constantly, and you can be that overflow of like love to someone. How do you would you kind of advise like the parent who just feels like they just don't have time for themselves?
I think there needs to be a reframe of what time means to you because yes, there is a time crunch for sure. So I recognize that and I'm a realist. I have 4 kids, so and I have a busy schedule. So yes, time is definitely one of those things to balance and juggle. But I think if it's important to you, you can make it happen. And that might mean you're waking up early. That might mean you're staying up a little later after your children go to bed. That might mean that you are literally penciling yourself in like you would schedule one of your children's activities. Because a lot of times we don't give ourselves that space. But like, if you're a coffee drinker, you somehow find a way to go make it to the coffee stand. You know what I'm saying? If things are really important to you, you do find a way. And so where there's a will, there's a way. So I think it comes down to maybe it's sitting down and journaling what it is you need in your life. If you're always doing for others, you at some point will start to burn out. You will become resentful. You will start to feel all those things that aren't going to be very helpful to you in your life. So I really think of self-care as a necessity and not a luxury. And that is something else that I really promote because I think we really need to create a different relationship with what self-care is. Because when you are optimally taken care of, you're going to be so much better at taking care of your family, doing your job, at just interacting with the world around you. So it really is actually a gift you're giving everyone else by taking care of yourself. Shifting that focus of what time is and making it almost be a non-negotiable. Maybe you set a certain, maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's an hour, whatever you can fit in your day to partner with things that bring you joy is going to actually create ripples of joy in your home. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I like the example about the if you're a coffee drinker, you're always going to find a way because it's important to you. Yeah.
That's right, right. So you have to, I think there has to be a curiosity, there has to be a willingness to make changes because if it's not there, then you're not going to change your habits, right? But
Mm,
if you're noticing that that's something that you need, I believe you can find a way to make it happen.
mm.
I do. I mean, I've got 4 kids and I have a very
Yeah.
busy schedule and I still wake up. I wake up early. I have certain habits and discipline in my life to help me because when I don't make time for it, I feel the effects and my family feels it too. I just don't show up as the best version of who I can be.
Yeah, absolutely. You got four kids. You're speaking, you're writing, you're creating. You're on a tour at the moment, getting the word out there, and yeah, waking up early, making that time for you. So I think that's a great example. Holly, I'd love to hear a little bit about the like kind of what's a bit more. You've shared quite a lot of what's in the book and some of these things, but I'd love to hear like what's kind of like an outline, what kind of sections are in the book, that you've written.
Yeah, so my book is truly the foundation is in my title. So it's Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow. And the aim of my method is really to help revolutionize the way you parent, help you align with how you want to show up for your family, and also show you how to tend to your own heart in the process because I think it's so important, right? It's not just about giving everything away. So it's about becoming more self-aware and more conscious of how you're showing up in your life, both for yourself and as a mother or father. So the framework part to break it down. So the first part is stop, and that is truly stopping and doing some self-assessment on, where you are to date, even adding in some levels of reflection. I really believe in reflection, and that is something I also put in my book at the end of every chapter of reflection questions so that you can not simply passively read what I'm offering, but also holding that mirror up to yourself and asking like, how does this actually look in my life? It's about doing internal gazing on anything that's going well as anything that isn't, and then beginning to cultivate more self-awareness, more curiosity and consciousness on your journey. And it's also about really shifting gears from operating from a space of reactiveness to more response. So that's briefly what the first section is about. The second part is drop, and that's learning to drop any drama, trauma, any personal past lived experiences that are keeping you from living in the now. When you engage with this, it allows you to become more present in your own life and with your family. So this step can be very freeing, but sometimes this is work that might be better, you might be better served to work with a healthcare professional or a life coach. Some of this you can work through on your own, depending on what your life path has looked like, right? We all have different struggles and challenges in life. So it's you knowing what you need. But I think it can really be beneficial to shed those skins that you no longer wish to wear that are really not serving you in your life and maybe keeping you from really living in that present moment in time with your loved ones. The third part is grow. And this is about learning to lean on habits that are going to help you expand as a parent. So this can be things like diet, mindfulness, exercise, sleep, reducing substance in your life or eliminating it altogether. Maybe even considering, like as I mentioned earlier, thanking your children for all they have taught you, because I think that they are these wise little creatures that come into our lives and, they push all the buttons you never knew you had, but they also teach you about some of the most joyful moments that you're ever going to experience as a human being. So it's all of the things, but I also really love honoring our children in this process and truly telling them thank you. And then the fourth part of my framework is glow. And this one is really learning to take what you've learned from my framework and then applying it to your life and living it out in the world. And so a big part of this is the daily self-care that we just talked about. It's also about becoming more intentional in how you move through your life, making time to take care of yourself so you can better serve others. I do believe that you have the power as a parent to be luminous, but it takes a bit of discipline, thoughtfulness, to really cultivate more of that in your life. So this is a very brief paintbrush stroke of the framework, but it definitely requires some depth. And like I said, it's not necessarily a surface level parenting book, but I think people are hungry to go a little bit deeper in this day and age.
Is it for more the parent who's like brand new, or kind of like that parent who's got a bit of a block, or kind of just all parents really?
It's across the board. And in my work, I really, I want to serve all parents, all caregivers. This book would be beneficial to read before you've had children, while you're having children, even after you've had children. I've had people read it afterwards. I've even had people who don't have children that have read it and said this book was really helpful to me. So that was interesting feedback as well. So I think that truly it's a book that can serve all.
Okay, so yeah, across the board. I want to touch a little bit on what you said about, I think it was in the second section with the reaction versus response. It was in the second section, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. I'm happy to go.
Yeah, love to
Sure.
love to know a little bit more about what is the difference, because yeah, sometimes emotions can build up. Someone does something against what we don't want, particularly maybe a kid, or they kind of just be pushing, right? I know I did as a kid, those kind of things. What's the difference between the two? And yeah.
So there is a huge difference between reaction and response. And I think learning to distinguish between both of them is going to really help you navigate both as a parent and just in life. Because to me, the biggest difference is the level of consciousness involved. So with reaction, it's rooted in instinct, and that's typically your unconscious. So it's kind of what's waiting there for you. It's like that, it's a comfortable thing to respond. Response is more deliberate in nature, and there is a level of consciousness present when you're interacting with another. So, the issue with reaction is that it's immediate, it's emotion driven, and it's typically not mindful. And it's oftentimes also driven by impulse. So your kid's having a meltdown and you're shooting right back to your child what they're offering to you. And what I would say is that you don't have to join in their emotional tornado. You have the choice to rise above and really be that calm in the storm. And that's really what conscious parenting is about. It's like, hey, having an awareness that your kids are going to dysregulate, they are going to have tantrums, they are going to slam their door, they are going to do all these things, but you don't have to operate in the same way they're operating in. In fact, I would encourage you not to. But it's hard when you're triggered or you haven't been sleeping well or you're going through all the things that parents go through. And I think the other thing that's hard is that parents often have to make these snap decisions and they don't really have a lot of time to really think about how they want to optimally reply. And so in that moment of feeling overwhelmed, you might say something that you regret or set consequences that aren't ideal for you or your children. And so what I would say is to, if your typical approach to your child having a big meltdown is to scold them, get loud, or reactionary, I would say stop. Try to give them a hug and get quiet. Okay. Not all actions or naughty behaviors that might not be appropriate for, but a lot of times it is. And I think what happens is you end up both benefiting from a softer place to land. And it's hard. I actually think it's harder to get calm and hold your own when you're being met with really intense, stressful moments. So it is a practice. Now, with response, it's more considerate and thoughtful in nature. You can stop and process before you open your mouth, which is huge. It's really a game changer. And response takes more work. It takes more patience, both with yourself and with your children. But when you remember to respond, it allows you to process, remember your manners, remember your intention, your leadership skills as a parent, which is where we want to be headed, right? And I will say, like, if you're having a moment where you feel like you're at max capacity, like taking 4 deep breaths, maybe even stepping in another room for a minute before you open your mouth. Like if you're feeling like the fire is right there, ready to roll, like truly just giving yourself a second, maybe putting your hand on your heart. Those are just some different ways that you might like start noticing what's there. But when you partner with response, the thing that's great about this is it's typically solution oriented rather than punitive. Okay, so it's also allowing you to move forward in a healthy and dynamic way, and it's going to help improve those social skills in your house. It's going to allow for more self-awareness, more self-regulation, and even empathy. So truly, I think why I believe response is where it's at, is it's going to help you deepen your connection with your child. And I think that, that's where we're headed, but I still think there's a lot of work to be done in homes across the world, truly.
I like that your book touches on that in terms of the response, because we're always a work in progress as human beings, and it can be a challenge just like human to human, let alone like kids. So no, I'm glad the book touches it sounds really great that the book touches on that. I'd love to know kind of obviously on the podcast, there's a lot of people who listen who kind of got this stuck on negative self-talk about themselves and like, oh, I messed up here, I messed up here. Does the book go into this for parents at all, for the parents who might be doubting their their skills at certain points, or have I really done a good job for this child?
Well, you know what? Here's the deal with parenting and with life. That I think we have this false sense of like perfection that we have to be getting it. And the reality is nobody's getting it perfect at all. I mean, we're all perfectly imperfect. So I think practicing some grace with yourself. I think guilt can be one of those big things that we carry. That is something I do talk about in my book, is that guilt. So, you might have guilt for being a working parent. You might have guilt for being a stay-at-home parent. You might have guilt for, being a part-time, working part-time because you feel like you're failing at both. You're not doing your job well enough and you're not at home enough. So I think you need to change your relationship with what you see as being good enough, being good enough, because they're being perfect and having things look perfect from the outside, because I think that there's a lot of ego involved too with parents. Like if your kid's misbehaving or if you're going through different things and it doesn't look the way you want it to, then you carry shame or you carry guilt or you carry those things. So I think learning to be really meeting where you are, like accepting what is versus what you think it should be, that for me was a really like a light bulb moment, like just being with what is. And so whether that's perfect or not, like that's being human. That's the journey we're on. We're all learning. We're trying to figure out, why are we here? What are we doing? How, what is this moment teaching me? So I think just getting more curious and allowing your guard to drop a little bit more than you think it can will be really helpful.
Being in this moment and learning we're in this journey we're all in this journey, right? That
We are.
perfection illusion.
Yes.
No one gets it right first time.
Ellen. Yes. And
Powerful.
you might not get it right the second time either. I mean, I think there are certain lessons that you have to learn over and over and over again until things start to fire. But I again meet whatever's meeting you on your path with grace and humility, because nothing will humble you like becoming a parent. I will say that. It is a very humbling process. Just be open to learning and growing to the best of your ability.
And guidance like your book is somewhere to help people kind of like learn some of the lessons that you've learned as well, and many others. So,
Yes.
yeah, I'd love to know, Holly, as we kind of like wrap up. I think that's a great note to kind of send to people, where can the listener find your book or get in touch with you and what you're doing at the moment? And is there maybe a final point you'd like to share with us today?
Sure. Yeah. So my book is available on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy your books. It's also available on Audible and anywhere you buy your audiobooks. I am on Instagram. My handle is at Holly Swenson _ live your glow. And my website is liveyourglow.live. And I will leave you with this. I would encourage you to take 5 to 20 minutes today and do a mind, heart, body scan of how you are doing as a if you're a parent or just as a human being, and get curious about what shows up for you. Any areas that might need some extra TLC, any areas of tension, anything that you start to notice, because the more you start to allow these pockets of really being more present with yourself, it's going to help you start down a path of more awareness, growth, and grace, both for yourself and those in your life. And then build from there.
Powerful practice. No, thank you for that, Holly. Appreciate that. And yeah, for everything you've shared today. So Holly's book will be linked in the show notes below, and Holly's link to get in touch with Holly. Some incredible resources, especially the book for parents out there. So thank you, Holly, for coming on today and sharing everything you've shared and for all the work you're doing.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.